Today I'm meeting with Shawn Merlen of Master Investigations firm. He is a private investigator and someone I have personal experience with because I have utilized Shawn's services years ago, but it's a great story and we're going to cover that. But also, we're going to, before we do anything else, get your contact information, Shawn, for anybody that may want to call you after they've had a chance to get to know you a little bit.
Okay, it's 801-541-3802, or you can go to my website, which is masterinvestigationsfirm.com.
All right. So before we talk about some of the things that a private investigator can do generally, why don't you tell me a little bit about how you came to be a private investigator, or kind of generally what a lot of people might do to become a private investigator, and why being a private investigator is so different from someone who might just want to have a buddy try to help them out doing private investigator work. Kind of warn people about the differences and some of those things too. Would you be so kind?
Yeah. Okay, so we, when we look into, when I started, I was a single father, came back to Utah, and my ex-wife tried to get custody of the kids, found out it was really expensive to try to do anything, barely could afford my attorney, so I started looking into the situation and looking into paperwork and looking into the whole private investigation situation for myself. Found out I had a pretty good knack for it, and I've been doing it for 24 years.
Tell us a little bit about, because people oftentimes will think, especially if there's infidelity or questions about somebody hiding assets or things like that, they might think, oh, private investigator might be useful, and then they look into, oh, it's expensive and it's time consuming, and so then they think, well, I'm going to do it myself. Would you tell people what it is that private investigators and only private investigators can do, and the kinds of legal trouble you can get into if you try to do it yourself or have your best friend or your brother or sister try to help you out?
Our new privacy laws nowadays, they have the new stalking laws, and a spouse can look into anything that has her name on it, but if she starts following around her estranged husband, starts getting friends or family to follow him around, it can be considered stalking and you can face charges for it. I've actually seen it, so it's not, you know, we do this as a profession. Not one of those things that,
oh, I'm going to scare you with a possible thing that never actually happens.
Exactly. It does happen. They can come after you, you know, and I've seen it. So.
Yeah, and not only can they get criminal charges for stalking, you can also get what's known as a civil stalking injunction against you. So there's a number of things that can happen, and that's not good for your friend or your brother that was going to try to help you out, or your sister. It's also bad for your own case, because now you look like the kook who's following your estranged husband or wife around, or the girlfriend, and now you're the crazy person that they need protection from.
Yeah.
What are some of the other things that private investigators can do legally that regular citizens can't do?
Well, we can set up a surveillance and we can follow them. We can also videotape, audio tape. We can use still pictures, which is fading away. It's more the video now. But we can legally videotape any action that's in public view or that's in a public area. Whereas if you're doing it to another person, they can actually press stalking charges on you. So you have to, you know, we do this. A lot of people say that getting an investigator is expensive. But if you look at the benefits of it when you get your case into court, I feel like it pays for itself.
Well, and a good example of that would be, especially if you're trying to prove infidelity, you could have the husband or wife who claims to be the victim of that talk till he or she's blue in the face, and then the other spouse simply, oh, I deny it, I deny it, that's crazy, I mean, I'm hurt that I would be accused. Well, then somebody like you walks in and says, look, I don't have a dog in this fight.
Right.
And don't take my word for it.
Right.
Let me show you some video. Let me show you some audio recordings. Let me show you some receipts or things like that. Or let me show you a logbook that I was able to look at when I walked into the lobby or something like that. You know what I'm saying? Things that you could get your hands on that the spouse, him or herself, could not.
Everything I do in my investigation, when I do an investigation, I cater towards what my client needs to succeed in court. And like I say, we can get into spots that you'd get in trouble for doing it.
And how often have you been in court? What kind of experience? You've been doing this for about 25 years, you say?
About 24 years, yeah.
How many times have you gone to court, and what kind of things have you had to talk about?
More times than I can remember. But usually I verify my my evidence, which is usually the videotape or the audio tape. You know, I verify where it came from, that it was taken lawfully, and usually once it's in court and it's looked at, they can't dispute it. It's on video, it's right there, it's, you know, you can't dispute what you're looking at.
Before we talk about a couple of maybe some great war stories that may be really exciting, or some that are kind of plain Jane but still really paid off big, talk about, before we get to that, some of the information that you have access to because of your private investigator status that I wouldn't be able to get to as a citizen. Some of the databases or some of the kind of information you can get.
There are, we have a vast group of investigators who that's all they do is data. And they collect data and they sell the data, and I use a company like that, and what they can get me is everything from marriage, birth certificates, death certificates. They can get anything you do on social media now. We have investigators that's their prime thing, is to get on social media and find out what you're doing there. A lot of people, a lot of cheating spouses like to brag on the internet, and we like to catch them on the internet.
Why can't I do that, though? I mean, can't I just go get this data? Can't I find
You
out?
can, but these guys have specific search engines that break it down and find these particular people,
That I don't have
whereas
access
you
to.
would be searching through various, you know, you may luck out and find them, but you're not going to be able to link them to other stuff like this programs that they have and the search engines they have. They'll find the person. Once they find them, they can go ahead and find any background, and it's verified. Whereas if you can't verify it, you may be giving them, you know, John Smith's stuff, and it may be another John Smith.
Okay.
And that's embarrassing in court.
Yeah, embarrassing, and also, yeah, you might be able to do it, but it's going to take you hours and weeks and months, perhaps.
It
that
will.
Somebody else
It
can
will.
pull up in a matter of minutes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. So, could you give us some examples of where your services were retained for the benefit of somebody? Now, remember, we think about infidelity a lot when we deal with private investigators, and you've had plenty of experience with that. But why don't you tell us a few of those, or anything else that you think would be a good example of where people that use a private investigator may be thinking, oh, that's too much, that's too expensive, too risky, but it turns out that what they couldn't afford to do was not take the chance.
Right. Well, infidelity, of course, is one of the main ones when you're dealing with, you know, divorce and stuff, but there's also issues involving custody, child support, things like that. Custody's a big thing to me because, as I said, I was a single father for a bunch of years. I fought an uphill battle to keep them. So I tend to cater to situations with kids, and I will go ahead and, you know, look into that. And what you do is you look into the behaviors of the custodial parent, if you're the other parent looking, and you just, you know, monitor them, see what they're doing around town, see if they're mixing with people that they shouldn't be, or bringing their kids into a situation they shouldn't.
Or leaving their kids behind and partying all
Exactly.
night, or things like that.
Had a few of those.
Yeah.
There's also a lot that deals with the actual custody itself. There's a lot that deals with, you know, property and division of property and these kind of things. And they can get pretty nasty when you have two disgruntled exes that are fighting for property, fighting for kids, fighting. We kind of come in there and take it out of the person's hands so the stress isn't there for them. We can go ahead and do, you know, our job and give them the results so they can go in and fight the good fight.
You can legally follow people around without them knowing who you are, so they won't change their behavior. And you can find out what's going on, and they may think that they're getting away with it. They're in some kind of anonymous public place, or hanging out at the bar when they left the kids behind when they're too little to be left alone, all that sort of thing, and they're none the wiser because
Right.
you're a faceless person. I mean,
Right.
by the way, did you know this was a private investigator I was sitting next to? No, I mean, every time I've met Shawn, this is how he looks. Just like some guy that you could just kind of pass up, wouldn't notice. I mean, in fact, I've noticed that private investigators, the ones that are good, are people that you just don't notice.
Well, I can look like this. I can take the hat off and look like a completely different guy. That was embarrassing. I can, you know, I've done everything from being a bum, hanging out on the street corner, to, you know, I was an ad exec once. You have to be careful when you take on another persona that you don't do anything to mess with the case, because if you get over there and you get caught up in what you're playing and you go too far, you can actually cross some lines that they can come back at you in court with. So you have to be careful. But I've been doing this long enough, I've kind of got a handle for it. When you hire an investigator, you know, look at their experience. Don't be afraid to ask them questions. Don't be afraid to tell them what you need. You know, a lot of people come to me and they say, well, what can you do for me? And I tell them what I can do for them, you know, but then they don't ask questions, and I always tell them, ask questions. Ask me what you want out of this.
Tell me what's on your mind. Tell me what worries you. Tell me what concerns you have.
And then we'll work out a plan to get what you need with the littlest conflict in your life, littlest trauma going on, you know.
Have you ever had any assignments where you were trying to prove drug use or drug addiction?
Mm-hmm.
Have you ever had people that have denied being alcoholics or alcohol abusers, and you've been able to do anything there?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
It's a little harder with the drugs. The alcohol is kind of easy because people drink in public, people drink in a bar where I can go in with my undercover cameras. I have several undercover cameras depending on the situation. Drugs is a little harder, but it's possible. And it is a practical thing to look into when you're dealing with these kind of things, custody, divorce. Mm-hmm. You know, you want to make sure if they are doing drugs and you need that on your side, then you hire me and I'll do my best to get it. It's a little bit, the drug thing's a little bit risky, a little bit harder because it is an illegal thing, so they're hiding it. But I've been successful.
And not only can you be successful, but if I were following my spouse around trying to catch her taking drugs, everybody would say, well, isn't that your husband, like right behind you? Isn't that his car parked over there? So once again, it gives you the advantage. I was going to ask you, now you do more than just working in domestic relations. Mm-hmm. What do you do? What do you spend most of your time on? What do most private investigators spend their time on? Most
of them, the bulk is what they call personal injury, where you get injured either on the job or in an accident, and then you try to get compensated for it. We do a lot of that stuff where they're claiming that they're hurt worse than they are.
So you follow the guy around who says he can't do anything, and he's out there jet skiing and chopping wood and all that kind of stuff.
Jet skiing's funny. I had a guy that got helped into court by his brother holding his arm because he couldn't stand up by himself. 2 hours after the court, I was sitting on Utah Lake watching him jet ski all over the place. So.
All right, now, one of the things that I thought would be great for people to hear about is that, again, now without disclosing specifics, you ever been called in to prove that an ex-spouse receiving alimony was cohabiting again and thus shouldn't have it?
That's also a big one for us, yeah. Cohabitation can be proved in several ways. You know, we do some little things with the mail, we do some little things with, you know, watching when the person comes home, how he reacts to the house, if he comes and goes by himself, other things like that we look out for. Cohabitation is big when you're getting child support, or you're not child support, but alimony. And you think that they're cohabitating because that's one of the reasons why you lose alimony. We had a guy went out of town for you.
Right. So this is a situation where the ex-wife moved out of state, and it's just like, oh my goodness. I mean, talk about being able to cover your tracks. She was thousands of miles away. How in the world were we going to be able to prove anything? No neighbors that my client had in common, no friends that were hanging around there. So
hired me.
Hired you. And what do you remember what you did? Okay, so tell them a little bit about how you were able to prove the cohabitation. We won. We went to court over this. It wasn't. She didn't give up. I've had other situations where just the proof from the private investigator got them to roll over. But this is where we went to trial. What did you end up getting on her?
I went there and surveilled her apartment. Come to find out, she had another person living with her. I went to the mailbox, and her particular mailbox was stuffed with envelopes sticking out of it. I managed to be able to recover one that was actually laying on the ground. I took a picture of it with her name going to his address, and then I got another one with his name going to his address. He had some car parts delivered while I was there. I managed to get a good look at those and the going and coming addresses.
And for people that aren't familiar with the law, why would that be important for a car part with his name on it being delivered to her address?
Because it shows that he's cohabitating. It shows that he has some control over the house where he's having things delivered
This
there.
is my address.
Yeah.
Mail it to me where I live.
If it had been just one thing, they probably could have argued it, but we found several. So
Yeah. Now, why did you say it was important that you could see mail sticking out? Couldn't you just jimmy it open with one of your special private investigator lock picks or something like that?
you can't interfere with the United States mail. I don't even touch mail. Luckily for us, in that situation, his mailbox was so full that one of the letters fell on the ground. It happened to have her name and everything to verify her address.
Yep. And like you
That's
say, there
where
were
she was
things, it
at.
was so stuffed, there were things sticking out
Yeah.
that had barely covered the
Yeah.
lip of the thing. You could see the entire letter.
You could see his name on one of them, so I just took a bunch of pictures, didn't touch them. You know, the car parts were delivered. I stood in the hallway and listened to her accept them and took a couple of pictures of the car parts. And
I think you spent 10 days to 2 weeks, which of course is just thankless work. Just hanging around outside waiting for something, and eventually you were able to catch her coming and going, and him coming from going all hours
from the same
day.
place at the same,
Yep.
him coming and going when she was already there. I got her once coming and going when he was gone, which is the best because that shows that he accesses it without her knowledge. So it was a good case, and it was a lot of work, but it was worth it in the end.
Yeah, do you know how much money you saved my client? $175,000. That's how much he would have paid if he hadn't have gotten it terminated. And without your help, we would never have been able to do it because that was the only evidence we could have used. We didn't have anything else, and we certainly didn't have it in the state of Utah.
Now, a lot of people,
Yeah.
a lot of people panic when they hear, us talk about our pricing and stuff. But like I say, I mean, in the end, I have only had one case that didn't come through
That's amazing.
in 24 years.
Well, not only that, but I mean, first of all, $175,000. What do you remember billing him? I think it was around 10 grand, wasn't it?
I think it was around,
I think it was around. That's a lot of money. But he saved $175,000. Now, here's the other thing. Even if it doesn't turn up the evidence that you want, I talked to another private investigator, thought her husband was having an affair, and turns out that he was a drug dealer, and that's what the private investigator showed. Still helped her out. The other thing is, sometimes just knowing that you have the peace of mind of, okay, there was nothing there. Or, yeah, my spouse is a bad person, but at least I didn't leave any stone unturned. And do you always charge $10,000 for everything? No. So
No,
give us a
no.
little example of how you price things out so people get an idea
Well-
of how much flexibility there is.
I'm not your average investigator when it comes to pricing, just because the average right now is $70, $75 an hour.
Okay.
When I work with a good attorney that I like, then I charge him $65 an hour.
Okay.
If it deals with kids, sometimes, depending on the situation, I'll go down to $60 an hour. Just because I went through my trauma with my kids, so I want to help.
That's very thoughtful of you.
So,
And do I have to give you $1,000 in advance, $2,000 up front? Tell them a little bit about, so they have a feeling for what they'd be dealing with.
usually a retainer is required because in a domestic situation, I mean, if you don't get the evidence they want, some people get really upset about it, and getting paid's hard. But most of the time,
being upfront about it.
and like I say, there's only one case I've ever had where I didn't get anything, and I got paid fine. So, lost my train of thought.
That's okay. When it comes to the retainer, what's the average retainer for a domestic relations situation?
I usually hold the retainer at about 40% of what I estimate the cost to be.
Okay.
Sometimes less. I mean,
And what's
I
the
like to
average
work
cost?
with people.
What's the amount of time you're typically going to spend on trying to chase somebody down for an alimony, an infidelity, a child custody, some kind of parental fitness situation, something like that? How much time do you think you're going to be spending on average?
The minimum I try to do as a minimum is 3 days. That gives you a pattern. It gives you, 3 days of consistent where they can look and you can get a pattern together.
Something the court can rely upon?
Exactly. And then they can see this wasn't a one-time fluke, or she was doing something for 2 days, he had to come by. This sets it in ground. if I had my choice, I would say as much time as we could put on them, and not for the pay, but because of the result.
Value, yeah, and the
you
value
know,
of
the
the
value of
evidence.
the result.
Because if you were, you're talking, it's like 3 days, well, that's a long weekend.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that doesn't prove anything. So you can see, he's trying to save you some money. He's like, look, 3 days would be about a minimum.
Yeah, the bare minimum.
Yeah, the more I can get, then yeah, it's going to
1 or 2 days can be fought off in court. 3 days,
A little
that's
easier.
kind of the, you know,
A
that's
couple of weeks where maybe you're not there for
Exactly.
for 2 solid weeks, but you could come kind of randomly.
if you go like your first week and you go a couple of days, wait a week, go again a couple of days, what you're going to get is
A slice of
you're going to
life.
get a pattern. Yeah, you're going to see that those things aren't.
Just a one-time fluke. Exactly. Well, for those of the viewers that would like to have a chance to get in touch with you or something like that, thank you for sharing your experience, talking about how private investigators work. And so we'll finish up with your contact information one more time. It's Shawn Merlen.
Shawn Merlen. Any questions? Give me a call. It's Master Investigations Firm, 801-541-3802.
Thanks again.
Thank you.